Welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. You want to join the program, 888-589-8840 is the number to call. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. We'll start taking your calls toward the end of this segment. Now, a couple of items. I started the program today by talking about the racial makeup of the Church of Christ from the very beginning and how it was multiracial right from Jump Street. Right from day one, it was multiracial. 40% of the leadership of the church at Antioch, where the missionary endeavor to take the gospel to the remotest corners of the world, where it started, 40% of the leadership was from the continent of Africa. One guy's nickname meant black. Simeon, whose name was Niger, the Latin word for black, and then another guy from what is today Libya. Now, came across an interesting story here from Front Page Mag. This is taking place up in Wisconsin. Wisconsin now has 12 legislative districts where a majority of constituents are racial or ethnic minorities, and yet just 6 are represented by minority legislators. So in other words, you've got 6 districts that are represented by white lawmakers, but the population is majority minority. The majority of the population consists of racial or ethnic minorities, but they have picked white people to represent them in the Wisconsin legislature, half of them represented by minorities. This partly explains, the story goes on, why this year, for the first time, the legislature's Black and Latino caucus in the Wisconsin legislature is inviting white lawmakers who represent majority districts to participate in meetings, although catch this, it is stopping short of granting them full membership with the ability to vote on actions the group might take. Now, I don't know about you, but when you are making decisions about whether to exclude people based on the color of their skin, when you are making a decision to refuse people the right to vote based on the color of their skin, ladies and gentlemen, I would call that racism straight up. Now, maybe you saw, this is a good story. You know, there's a saying that I believe in, that coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. And maybe you saw this, a really heartwarming story about a guy by the name of Nicholas Simmons. So here's God remaining anonymous with what is apparently a coincidence. Nicholas Simmons disappeared from his parents' house in upstate New York on New Year's Day, leaving behind his wallet, his cell phone, and everything else. So he just disappears. They have no idea where he is. They're looking frantically for him. 4 days later, an Associated Press photographer, looking for a way to illustrate unusually cold weather, snapped his picture as he warmed himself on a steam grate a few blocks from the U.S. Capitol. Paul and Michelle Simmons saw the AP photograph in USA Today Sunday morning after it was brought to their attention through a Facebook page set up to help find their son. The photo showed Simmons with his unshaven face pressed against a grate outside the Federal Trade Commission. Wore a ski jacket and a hood over his head. A thick gray blanket covered his lower body. Now, the photographer was assigned to the White House that weekend, but with President Obama still on vacation in Hawaii. I don't know if you heard about that. President Obama is on vacation in Hawaii, and what does he do? He excoriates the Republicans for going home for the holidays. They went home. He went to Hawaii, and yet he's on their case for leaving town for the holidays. It just beggars the imagination after a while. Anyway, so the photographer had nothing to do because President Obama, she's on the White House detail. He's off in Hawaii snorkeling and all that kind of stuff. So she spent the day looking for shots that would illustrate the cold weather. That's how she found this guy in an area where homeless people often gather when it's cold outside. She noticed this one person in particular. It struck me how young he was. I introduced myself, shook his hand. He said his name was Nick. Martin finished shooting, sent the pictures to the wire, and called it a day. The next day, she received a message via Twitter from USA Today. The newspaper had run the photo of Nick and was contacting Martin to tell her that Nick's family had recognized him and was trying to locate him. Michelle Simmons was certain that the young man in the photograph was her son, missing for 4 days. Police picked Simmons up Sunday afternoon and took him to a hospital, said Captain Patrick Phelan of the Greece, New York Police Department. Simmons' father, Paul, and older brother, Paul Jr., arrived in Washington Sunday night and were reunited with Simmons at the hospital, said longtime family friends Peter and Cindy Gugino. So that's a really pretty cool story. You know, it's interesting. The lead investigator, David Mancuso, listen to the way he contradicts himself in the space of one sentence. It was pure dumb luck how all this happened. It's truly a miracle. Just crack. That was just pure dumb luck. Then right around, next word out of his mouth, it was a miracle. I'm going to go with the miracle explanation myself. Again, coincidences, God's way of remaining anonymous. Now, we got a couple of winnable war moments. Let me deal with a couple of issues quick, and then I have two pretty cool winnable war moments for you for the day. But first, I want to do a little bit of constitutional instruction. And by now, you should know the answer to this question. But let me illustrate for you what's at stake. If you understand the Constitution the way I do, and the way I believe the founders crafted it, you have an answer for each one of these three issues I'm going to bring to you. If you understand the Constitution in the way that judicial activists and liberals understand it, then you don't have an answer to these problems. You have no way to craft any public policy to deal with these problems. Here is story number one. This has to do with Weiner High School. Arkansas State Board of Education in Poinsett County, now this is Poinsett County School Board, has made a decision that they are no longer going to allow prayers over loudspeakers before football games just because they got a letter of complaint from the Freedom From Religion Foundation. Now, Freedom From Religion Foundation, they don't have a kid that goes to that school. They're just outsiders trying to make mischief, and there's another school board, one right after another, simply closes up shop instead of fighting it, instead of standing against it, instead of standing tall, standing strong, they just fold like a cheap Bedouin tent in a stiff desert breeze. So the Freedom From Religion Foundation says, look, you're violating the First Amendment if you have prayer over the loudspeaker before football games. Now, you and I know that according to the Constitution as it was given to us by the founders, it is impossible for a school in Poinsett County to violate the First Amendment. Why? Because they are not Congress. What's the first word in the First Amendment? Congress shall make no law. Everything else after that's irrelevant when it comes to Poinsett County because the First Amendment applies only to the Congress of the United States. It restrains only the Congress of the United States. The only entity that can commit a violation of the First Amendment, therefore, is the Congress of the United States. Poinsett County cannot possibly, historically, constitutionally, legally, rationally, logically, it's impossible for Poinsett County to violate the First Amendment because Poinsett County is not Congress. Now, here's another issue. ACLU of Florida is going to bat for the Satanic Temple. Now, they are claiming, again, religious liberty protections, constitutional mandate. They're also invoking free speech, I believe here, but they're saying that the Satanic Temple has a right to place a holiday display in the Florida Capitol. Now, again, we've been over this before, but if you go back and look at the history of the First Amendment, you look at the writings of Joseph Story, who was the author of the first authoritative history of the Constitution. He made it very clear, and again, this is not me. I'm just quoting Joseph Story here. This is not my idea. This is he was the longest-serving Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. He said the purpose of the First Amendment was not even to countenance or to promote other religions other than Christianity. It wasn't even considering them. Countenance means you face it, you're thinking about it, you're dealing with. It says it wasn't even dealing with that. It wasn't even touching on Hinduism or Islam or Judaism. It wasn't even dealing with those religious traditions. Its sole purpose was to exclude rivalry among Christian denominations. So the only topic in the First Amendment that's being dealt with under the freedom of religion plank was Christianity. And its purpose was to exclude rivalry among the various Christian denominations. Beyond that, when it came to regulating religious expression, that was left by the founders to the states. Very specifically, very directly. That's why they only limited Congress in the First Amendment. Why was Congress the only entity that was limited? Because those issues were going to be left to the states. Now, this is taking place in Florida. So what this means, this has nothing to do with the First Amendment now. This has everything to do with Florida, has everything to do with their Constitution, with their religious freedom plank. And if Florida, according to the Founding Fathers, again, not according to the way the Constitution's been mangled, but according to the Constitution as it was given to us by the Founding Fathers, Florida can ban the Satanic Temple if they want. Florida can keep a Satanic Temple from putting a display in the lobby of the Capitol if they want. That's an issue for the states to decide. And then one last, again, constitutional lesson here. This is from Missoula, Montana. I've been following this story because it started off in my home city of Boise, Idaho, which recently passed an ordinance that prohibited panhandling downtown. People sitting, laying down on blankets, and they hassle passerbys looking for handouts. It's panhandling. It's begging. And it's a real nuisance to people that use the downtown area. So Boise City Council banned it. Said you can't do it. A federal judge says, no, you cannot ban panhandling because it's a violation of the First Amendment's protection of free speech. You got a right to beg for money in public because of free speech. Well, that fails to understand. This federal judge, you know more about the Constitution now than he does. The purpose of free speech was specifically to protect political speech. Begging for money is not political speech. It's not protected. Focal Point, AFR Talk.